All right, welcome back to another stream.
All right, let's go. All right, welcome back to another stream.
yeah, 1 2 1 2, yeah. All right, so welcome back to another stream. As I can see, what the topic says: Davinci Resolve versus
1 2,
Final
yeah.
Cut
All right, so welcome back to another stream. As I can
for
see what the topic
iPod.
says, Davinci
And
Resolve
if you're on
versus Final
YouTube,
Cut.
you would
All
have
right, so welcome
seen
back to another
the
stream. As I
for
can see what the topic
iPod.
says, Davinci
And
Resolve
if you're on
versus Final
YouTube,
Cut.
you would
All
have
right, so welcome
seen
back to another
the
stream. As I
for
can see what the topic
iPod.
says, Davinci
And
Resolve
if you're on
versus Final
YouTube,
Cut.
you would have seen the.
For
I don't even know if it's
iPod.
doubling up. It sounds like it's doubling up.
If you're on versus Final
YouTube, you would have seen the.
for
I don't even know if it's doubling up. It sounds like it's doubling up.
if you're on
YouTube, you would have seen the. I don't even know if it's doubling up. It sounds like it's doubling up.
1 2 1 2
I don't even
1
know if
2
it's doubling up.
1 2 1 2
1 2 1 2
1 2 1 2
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. All right, so sorry about that. Welcome back to another stream. So I'm talking about DaVinci Resolve versus Final Cut for the iPod. And DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut are now on the iPad. Mind you, DaVinci Resolve was released about 5 months ago, and persons have been using DaVinci Resolve on the iPod. Now, Final Cut, Apple just released Final Cut on the iPad, probably about a day ago or 2 days ago. And we are going to look at it because the iPad is a very portable device, and a lot of persons use it for productivity. A lot of creatives have the iPad, especially when they're doing like Lightroom work and stuff like that. Now they have their editing suite, which is either DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut, depending on which NLE you use. Now, these two NLE are definitely not the same. Most persons who use Final Cut use it very differently than persons who use DaVinci Resolve. I would say the persons who are geared towards more color grading and stuff like that are more on the DaVinci Resolve side, while persons who are just trying to do simple edits or quick edits or certain type of edits are more on the Final Cut side. So now that these two software, two applications are on the iPad, what are the pros and what are the cons? So we're gonna look into it. I don't have much information about DaVinci, but I've watched a lot of video with persons talking about some of the stuff that you can do with it. Final Cut just come out, so I'm gonna jump on the Apple website and look at some of the stuff that Apple is saying they have in Final Cut. So let's look at the Apple website. So right now we are on the Apple website. Let me scroll up back to the top. It's a bring your entire studio to your shoot. So by they saying that this Final Cut for iPad bring your entire studio to your shoot, they're saying that you actually can bring your editing suite to your shoot. Mind you, this is somewhat misleading because this is not the entire Final Cut. This is a, I don't know if you want to call it watered down version of Final Cut, but this is not the entire version of Final Cut. And what I've learned based on the research or based on what I've seen persons being talking about it is that this is not something that can do what they call round trip. So you cannot do work on this, send it to Final Cut on the desktop, and then do work on it on the desktop and send it back to the iPad. So for instance, you're working on a project and you're on the road. So you kind of start the project, you do some stuff on the project on the road, then you send it to the Final Cut on the desktop. And when you send it to the Final Cut on the desktop, you do some more work, and then you're going back on the road. You cannot send back your project to your iPad and continue the work. That is a big, big, big downfall for this. And on the Davinci side, you can actually do the round trip. There's some other stuff about this that we need to talk about, and I'll basically explain. So bring your entire studio to your shoot. That's where they start. Record, edit, finish, and deliver all on iPad. So you can actually do that. Create vlogs, social content, music videos, shorts, and more. A complete pro video studio at your fingertips. So, as usual, Apple show off their stuff or they want to show off their stuff. And right there, it's right there. Get 1 month free and then pay $4.99 per month or 49 US annually. So what this is saying to me is that this program is subscription based. So you have to pay a subscription. Mind you, $4.99 annually is not that, 49 US annually is not that bad, but it's subscription. And I bet the question, is this Apple moving with their software, especially their video editing software, into the subscription model? Because I am a Final Cut user. And I am now wondering if Final Cut on the Mac will also be a subscription software in the coming years or months. Who knows? Mind you, when a software is subscription, I would really think that it will get more updates. I realize Final Cut is very lacking on updates, but let's go through the entire thing and see what this Final Cut is on the iPad about. All right, so on an all new creative interface for creatives. So it's basically a touch-based software as far as I can see it. It's very touch-based. See, you can actually use your pen to do what they call live drawing. And the live drawing actually is an animation over your clip. So that is very interesting. You have control over text. You can import iMovie projects. So for instance, you start working on iMovie, you can import it now to Final Cut. You can use the Apple Pencil and the keyboard. So an iPad is very touch based. So they have revamped or redesigned the Final Cut program to be very touch based. Will some of these features move over to the Mac? I don't know. What I've learned about this is that their multi-cam editing is very, I wouldn't call it unique, but it's kind of done differently on the iPad with the multicam editing. So if you're a Final Cut user on the Mac, because Final Cut is only on Mac, you would know how to use multicam. I use multicam a lot when I'm editing. So when you're using multicam and you put all of your clips in multicam, in order to switch between clips, you would press 1, 2, and 3 or 4, depending on how many cam setup you have. So you can have 4, you can have 9, you can have 10. Depending on how many, you will just press the number to basically switch between cam while it's playing. Now they're saying that this is touch based, so that's welcome. And see how you can do it there. You can actually switch between the various cams, switching angles. You can do very edits with the angles. Very touch based. So now you're watching the video playing and you're just pressing the various angles, wide, medium, and close up. Pretty cool. It says speed through workflows with Final Cut automation. So they have some automation. You know, everything nowadays is AI and automation. So they have automation, accelerate time-consuming editing tasks by using Final Cut's features that leverage the power of the Apple Silicon and machine learning. And they're speaking really about auto-cropping. So what auto-cropping does, for instance, you're trying to make vertical content, it actually follows the movement in the content and keep it in the vertical space, the 16 by 9, as opposed the 9 by 16 as opposed to 16 by 9. They also have auto background removal or scene removal mask. So you have the scene removal mask, the auto cropping, and also voice isolation. So these are some of the features that they're calling machine learning and automatic features that will help you to speed up your edits. They also introduce some titles, spectacular titles, transition, and effects, all included. So they are, bringing in some new titles, some new backgrounds, some new stuff. And based on what I've researched and what I've seen, it seems like third-party applications, motion VFX, stuff like that are now built in to Final Cut. So that's actually a good addition. That's actually a really good addition. But these things are, what I call it now, minuscule, because what I've learned based on a lot of persons who are more, into the know when it comes to this Final Cut has some downside. So what they're saying that is what they're saying is that you cannot use an external drive in order to do some of these things. You have to load all of your files on Final Cut, on the iPad, so to speak. You have to load all of your files on the iPad in order to get this to work. So you can't plug in an external drive and get it to work from it. Now let's talk about the verses, because I've run through the Final Cut. Because Davinci has been out for a while, the Final Cut is the new one. These are the things that the Davinci Resolve allows you to do. And we're going to look at Davinci page, but it doesn't have much information like the Final Cut. Blackmagic announced Davinci Resolve for the iPad, and this was 5 months ago. Let's go to some of the specs. So the Davinci Resolve for iPad features cut page for editing and color page for color page are optimized for the 12.9 inches iPad Pro display. Up to 4 Ultra HD ProRes rendering, performance improvement with the M2 chip. Support Apple Neural Engine featuring Davinci Resolve Studio for iPad. Compatible with Davinci Resolve 18 projects. Support multi-user collaboration with Blackmagic Cloud. Support the Apple Pencil, Magic Keyboard. So this is kind of like a little small overview of what it is. But let's talk about what persons who have been using Davinci Resolve for the iPad have been saying about it. So based on my research, persons who have been using this software is saying it's amazing. It's literally the same Davinci Resolve. Literally. So the Davinci Resolve on your iPad is not much different than the Davinci Resolve that you use on your computer. It can do round trips, so you can move a project from the Davinci Resolve 18 to your computer, work on it, and then move it back to your iPad and work on it again, which gives it an edge over the iPad Final Cut Pro. The Davinci Resolve allows you to plug in external drive. So you can have your files on your external drive, work on them on your computer, move the project file to move the project file to your external drive, and also work on it on your iPad, which gives it an edge over the Final Cut again. The next thing is that on the Davinci Resolve, they only have the cut page and the color page visible on the iPad. But I've been watching a lot of videos, and you can also bring up the edit page, Fairlight, and also is Fusion, the edit page, Fairlight, and possibly Fusion on the iPad. However, they're saying that these features are not 100%. They are not 100% optimized to be used on the iPad, so you might have some issues with it. But the mere fact that you can bring them up, it means that as soon as they're optimized, you will have the full-fledged Davinci Resolve that works very much like how it works on your computer on the iPad, which the Final Cut Pro is not. The Final Cut Pro is a stripped down version of Final Cut that they put on the iPad. And the worst part about it, it cannot do round trip. It cannot do round trip. So I don't think professionals will be using this. It doesn't make any sense. So why would I want to start my project on my iPad, then put it on my computer, and I cannot really do anything on the iPad from there? Why would I bother even start the iPad? The next thing is getting it on the iPad, getting all the information, all the videos, everything that you need on your iPad. Not an external drive. You have to load all of these files on your iPad. So right now, as far as I see, the Davinci Resolve, as far as I see, the Final Cut on the iPad is made for persons who have already been using, the Final Cut on the iPad is made for persons who have already been using LumaFusion, who have already been using software to edit on iPad, and solely on the iPad, and nothing more. That's my view of this Final Cut on the iPad. It's made for persons who is gonna solely use the iPad to edit. 100%. While Davinci Resolve is made for professionals who want to start their edit or finish their edit or go do something and actually have their edit with them, and then can continue their edit on their computer, or vice versa. But Final Cut is not that. And I hope that persons either watch this or hear this before they purchase an iPad, hoping that they're getting the full-fledged Final Cut that they are used to on their Mac, on their iPad. That is not the case. Not the case in a long shot. The Final Cut on iPad is a stripped down version of Final Cut that is made to compete with LumaFusion. It is not made to compete with Davinci Resolve. Davinci Resolve is another beast. Davinci Resolve is made for professional color graders, professional editors, professional persons. Final Cut is made for persons who use iPads or phones to make their videos, so that they can transfer files from their phone to their iPad, or use the files that they capture with the iPad to edit on the iPad. Because believe it or not, it will take a while to transfer your videos from your camera to your iPod. The next thing you have to remember is storage is very important. What type of storage do you have in your iPod? So these are the concerns that I think a lot of persons will have. And these are the concerns. When I saw it, these are the concerns. These are the first things that I asked if this Final Cut on iPad is actually going to live up to the persons who are using Final Cut. And I don't think so, based on the information that I have been getting, that I have been researching about this Final Cut. So this Final Cut won't work for many persons. It's cool that Final Cut is finally on the iPad. A lot of persons never expected it. It's now here. It is now here. Final Cut for the iPad. But is it worth the time to invest in this when it won't really be useful as a professional working? It won't really be useful. It seems cool. It looks very interesting. But at the end of the day, as professionals, we want tools that works for us. And I don't think this Final Cut works for the professionals who are using Final Cut on their Mac to make their videos. I love that you can do live trace, live drawing. But a lot of the questions that I see persons are asking online is, can you transfer these live drawings to your project on the computer? Well, maybe what you would have to do is do all of these live drawing on a tablet, on your iPad, do the live drawing for all the clips that you want the live drawing for, then transfer it to your computer, and then you might have this live drawing that you can use on your computer. Oh, Rochelle, she's on it. So Rochelle, why it won't work is these two software are very different. Final Cut on the computer is very different than Final Cut on the iPad. There are two different software. So if you have a project on your computer, it's not the same type of project that works on the iPad. So they're very different. They're very, very different. So when you send this project to your computer can actually accept and read the project from the iPad. But the iPad cannot accept and read the project from the computer. I don't know why Apple did this. Apple made a big blunder with this. Big, big, big blunder. Massive blunder as far as I see it. So that's one of the major downside of this. Even if it's the same project. Even if it's the same project. So what they call that is round trip. What they call that in the world of money making business. What they call that in the world of content creation is round trip. So you can start it on your iPad and send it to your computer, work on it, and then send it back to your iPad. Final Cut cannot do that. Davinci Resolve, on the other hand, can do that. So Davinci Resolve is a much better software for professionals. Mind you, I am a Final Cut user. I use Final Cut to edit my videos. But of late, I have been learning how to use Davinci Resolve. I have been doing a lot of research on Davinci Resolve. I've downloaded a lot of courses on Davinci Resolve to understand it. Mind you, it's a little bit different. It doesn't have the magnetic timeline and some of the stuff that I've gotten used to in Final Cut. However, when I look at DaVinci Resolve, I realize that it's a more editor software. It's a more professional software than Final Cut. No, you can edit on the iPad itself without the computer. But here is one of the downside that you will face on the iPad. You will now have to transfer all your files that you need to edit to the iPad, because it cannot work with your external drives. You cannot plug an external drive into your iPad and it works, unless Apple decide to update this tomorrow. But as it is right now, this moment, you cannot plug an external drive into your iPad and use it to work from when you're editing. But you can do that with DaVinci Resolve. So these are some of the questions that persons are asked. These are some of the stuff that makes Final Cut for the iPad not useful for professionals. It's not useful for professionals. But again, Apple wanted the Final Cut on the iPad. Persons were requesting it. Persons never really knew if they would have gotten it, because they have been requesting a lot of stuff for Final Cut. I am hoping that, given that they have made this push for Final Cut with iPad, some of these features on the iPad will go over to Final Cut on the desktop. Like auto cropping, the caption, live cap, a lot of these stuff. DaVinci Resolve already had these stuff. DaVinci Resolve already had a lot of these stuff. A lot of these features were already in DaVinci Resolve. I'm hoping so, and I'm it's Apple, so maybe in the future they'll get it. They'll do an update and change some of the features. But while them put it out, we are glad that it's here. It's still very disappointing. And the next thing about it is that they released this before WWDC. I remember WWDC is their software event where they talk about a lot of the software and stuff like that. So there is possible a chance that they will probably release an update or talk about it more at DubDub, and maybe it will get better then. Maybe. But as it is right now, this is what it is. I would recommend, if you are serious about your creativity, if you're serious about your editing, DaVinci Resolve is the way, even on the desktop. Mind you, you can use Final Cut, you can use Premiere, but DaVinci Resolve, based on the suite of application, we're talking about the DaVinci Resolve, we're talking about Fairlight, we're talking about Fusion, we're talking about all of these software inside of the DaVinci Resolve package for a one-time price, versus Adobe side where you have to pay a subscription forever. And there's a strong possibility Final Cut will be going to subscription soon. Based on that, the Final Cut on the iPad is subscription. But that's my take. That's my take on it. I will not speak anymore on it. I think my live stream has gone long enough. I said I was going to speak on it for 15 minutes. And my conclusion is that DaVinci Resolve for the iPad is far more useful for creatives, for professionals, than Final Cut for the iPad. So DaVinci Resolve for the iPad wins. DaVinci Resolve for the iPad wins. And that's my take. So until the next live stream, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bless up yourself.